Okay, once we get here, well, it's time to start to gather the tasks together that you've discovered through interviewing and use different techniques here to build out your task list. It's also important to start to understand how the various tasks fit together and how the workflows work at a detailed level. So a technique here is to build a user task matrix by persona. I'll show that a little later here. But the gist of this is given a piece of data, metrics in this case, how does a persona interact with that data? So the project implementer from our previous example creates anticipated metrics for each proposed project. So they estimate metrics. Program monitor would review program accomplishments by assessing metrics against objectives defined in the BIOP, the biological opinion that we're addressing here. So that's setting some of our goals. So they actually review metrics. The cool thing about this in this perspective is it lets you walk in the shoes of your users, and it deepens your understanding of what they need to complete their work. And it builds a rapport to help you get them excited about making improvements in their work process in many cases. Some task analysis techniques to think about here are, and you can research some of these on your own. I'm not gonna go much deeper there. Workflow analysis, job analysis, task lists and inventories, process analysis, task sequences. You can create task hierarchies, and you can do procedural analysis. Those are different types of techniques that are out there in this workflow improvement space. Okay, I'm going to show a key technique that we use quite frequently, and it's a user task analysis. This helps us come up with a picture of all the different user tasks going on and how people interact with data within a program or an organization. And then it helps us prioritize which ones are most important to think about automating in systems. So the process here is compile all the user tasks together from your interviews that you've completed previously. Set up your team who's going to review these. Ideally, the key folks that you interviewed would be part of this process. And you would review all the tasks with them to make sure they understand. I'll show more details of what the tasks look like here. You create cards for each identified task. And then you do a card sort with key stakeholders. A card sort's a technique where you ask people to make decisions about how important something is, how important a task is on a scale. And so we have two scales that we like to use. You can use others as well. One is criticality. How critical is this task for that person in their job? And frequency. How often is the task performed by the person in their job? And then finally, you compile and report on the results. We've seen some really wonderful conversations and shared understandings come out of this process. So it's fun to experience this with a group that's bought in to working on this. This photo here is from our work with Clean Water Services in their watershed management department. Let's see. So the results of this allow you to start to compile the user tasks and score them on this criticality and frequency dimension. So you can see here, this is a subset of the tasks that were part of the card sort for Bureau of Reclamation. And for each person here, they gave each task a criticality score and a frequency through the card sort. And it allowed us to total up an overall score for each task. This is pretty cool just to get an understanding of how people view their work and what's important to them. You can also connect it to workflow areas or workflows that you defined earlier to connect it to a broader picture of how the organization works together. But what's really cool is the next slide. And if you're thinking about process improvements, you can create a quadrant view here that lets you map each task out on a average criticality scale and an average frequency scale And what this tells you is stuff up here in the northeast, that will be must-have functionality we should consider improving. So that's stuff that we need to make better, we should focus and invest time in. That will help you focus on what's most important to the most people in your organization. The quadrant here in the northwest, good to have. That's stuff that happens frequently but isn't very critical. That allows you to gain efficiency in your work and lowers tedium. So you may consider biting off some of these in your plan. Down here in the southeast are good to have kinds of tasks as well. These are critical, but they don't happen frequently. You might consider including these in your improvement plan to help gain confidence and lower risk. And then the ones down here may not be as important to focus on right away. All right, so that's the user task analysis technique in a nutshell. Any questions? No, okay. All right, moving on.
Can you hear me, Brian?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I didn't hear I just heard what you said. Can you hear me, Brian? Was there a question?
I'm not, you're kind of breaking up for me.
Oh, am I?
But
okay.
Yeah, there was a question. Basically, there's a little bit of delay. The question that I have is kind of regarding this slide. How do you prioritize, what process would an organization use to prioritize these into the must-have, good to have, may not need, or good, or good to gain confidence, the lower good to have?
Which process would somebody follow? Yeah, this is output from this card sort activity that I presented here on this slide. And then we compile the results here, and then we're able to produce a picture like this based on the scoring. So it's the organization, it's the folks in the organization who provide that information. In the past too, we've also done allowed management to have an opinion on what areas they would like to see, so they can put their thumb on the scale a bit at times to help increase the score here or there for things that they know are important from an external perspective.